thank you so much for joining us. I am Laura Moy. I'm a professor at Georgetown Law School and director of the Communications and Technology Law Clinic. We are counsel for CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, on this complaint that you all are here to hear about. So as you have heard already, we filed a complaint this morning with the Federal Trade Commission asking the FTC to investigate and bring enforcement actions to stop unfair and deceptive practices by numerous actors in the location data industry. These practices are harmful to all consumers, but they are particularly harmful to individuals in historically disadvantaged and hyper-surveilled communities, such as in the American Islamic community. So I'm just going to say a word about the clinic here. The clinic that I just mentioned is a student-run operation at Georgetown Law School. We represent nonprofit organizations and individuals on a variety of tech policy matters, typically where there's something that has a disproportionate impact on historically disadvantaged communities. We have had 5 students work on this complaint over the course of 3 semesters. 2 of them are going to speak with us here today, and we have a number of students from the clinic with us as well in the room. So as you will hear, this is all due to the great work of law students who have done fantastic research and advocacy here. So we call on the FTC to protect individuals from these nefarious actors in the location data industry. I am going to turn it over to others to speak now so that you can hear more about the impact on individuals of these practices, as well as why the FTC should act. So first I'm going to turn it over to Nihad Awad, the Executive Director of CAIR.
Thank you and good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank Georgetown Law Center and the students and the great team who have been working on this complaint to work and represent CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is the largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization in the country, representing 35 offices, and also representing the interest of millions of Americans at home. Speaking of technology, technology is a large part of Muslim daily life, just like it is for everybody else. Muslims in particular use apps like Muslim Pro, Muslim Mingle, Qibla, and I'll explain them for what, to practice the religion in the United States and all over the world. Muslim Pro is an important app. It has been downloaded by over 100 million people, mainly Muslims. Qibla Qibla means the direction for prayers towards Mecca, is also downloaded by hundreds of millions of people all over the world. And Mingle Muslim, obviously young Muslims who would like to build relationships and family, they use the app to meet people. So it's a dating app. This is just a few of many apps. We use them to determine the time when to pray, because the time for a prayer is varying every day, and Muslims pray 5 times a day. Even at home, if you don't have like an alarm on your computer, most likely you will be using an app like Muslim Pro. If you are traveling, like I was traveling in the past couple of days in Texas, I was in the hotel, and I wanted to determine the direction of the prayer, and I could not know it. I deleted myself these apps because of concerns about privacy. So I really had a hard time finding the direction of Mecca to pray. So I just made a guess, and I felt inconvenienced. I wanted just to call some people to determine the time of the prayer, because I try to avoid using the apps. So it is becoming very, very inconvenient for me when I travel, like millions of people, to practice my faith because of fear of someone spying on me and taking or collecting my personal data for nefarious use, whether to give it to the US government, the US military, intelligence agencies, or even other corporations. I'm sure every American will be very, very concerned about the violation of personal privacy and safety. So even when we go to hotels to attend a conference or a meeting, it is commonly known that many Muslims will just pick up their phones and turn on the apps and argue over the direction of Qibla because they will be using different apps. However, when we do this, we feel comfortable, we feel safe. Now, as it was revealed a few years ago, for the US government and intelligence agencies to exploit and take advantage of these apps to violate Muslim rights is nothing but deplorable. And that's why we're asking today the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, to look into these violations and take the necessary steps. No one should feel violated. No one should feel threatened by just practicing their faith. Religious freedom, religious liberty is a foundation of our democracy and should be a given foundation for everyone. So I'm really feel violated that my government continues to do that, and because of that fear, I stopped using these apps. Now, a message to these apps, especially if they're owned by Muslims: stop aiding and abetting organizations and governments who violate our civil and human rights. For a cheap bucks, you should not do that. And for the government should be held accountable when they violate these things. So we call on all authorities to provide protections to investigate these nefarious and deceptive tactics to violate people's freedom. And I thank the legal team from Georgetown and our legal team, Gadir and his colleagues, who have brought this complaint to light. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I was remiss in my failure to encourage the spelling of names. So I'm Laura Moy, that's Lauramoy, and we just heard from Executive Director Nihad Awad, that is Nihadawad. So I'm going to turn it over to one of our student attorneys in the clinic, Luke Evans, who has been working on this complaint for this semester.
Hi there. In the spirit of spelling names, my name is Luke Evans, Lukeevans. So thank you, Nihad. As you just heard, the American Muslim community is uniquely affected by these tactics of secretly harvesting user location. Now I'm going to broaden out and talk about some of the practices within the location data industry that we feel are in need of particular attention from the FTC. First, I just want to underscore the massive scale at which this is happening. Thousands and thousands of apps are transmitting exact location data to dozens and dozens of data brokers, who then can resell that information to virtually anyone they please. It's a vast, complex ecosystem that is largely opaque to the average consumer. So, what are these specific issues? There are three I want to highlight. And first is one that I think will be familiar to a lot of people. Take a hypothetical weather app, and when the user downloads it, the weather app says, we want your location to provide accurate forecasts. However, probably unbeknownst to that user, this weather app might send their location out to a third party. Now, this might be disclosed deep in a privacy policy, cloaked in vague language. The end result is that there's deception happening here. The user is not aware of what they're signing up for. Second, the apps themselves may not even be aware that this is happening, and so they can't disclose it in the privacy policy. So for example, this is what happened with Muslim Pro a few years ago. A middleman data broker secretly installed location tracking code into the Muslim Pro app without Muslim Pro's knowledge. And so the users cannot be aware of what's happening when that happens. So that's a further way that people are being deceived. Finally, let's imagine that the user of the app is pretty privacy conscious, and they go into the app, they want the accurate weather forecast, so they accept the location tracking. But then they go into the app settings and opt out of third-party sharing. The problem is, we know that these data brokers are finding technical workarounds and getting that information even when consumers opt out within the apps, violating their express choices. The end result is people are not aware of what's happening, and they have no real ability to control it either. These are practices that the FTC has declared illegal in the past, and yet this conduct still proliferates today within the location data industry. Now, I just want to end by emphasizing that this causes real-world harm. As you heard from Nihad, this interferes with the practice of our religion, which is a sacred right in this country. You know, bounty hunters and stalkers also access this information. It's pretty easy, and this can lead to increased risk of harassment and abuse. This is unethical, it's unfair, and it's also illegal under the Federal Trade Commission Act. And so now I'm going to pass it off to Quentin to tell you more about what the FTC can and should do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke, for the introduction. That's Quentin Stewart, spelled Quinten, Stewart. And I also want to give thank you to any members of the press, any policy staff, thank you to CAIR, or anyone else who took time out of their day to get more information on this topic, whether it be to report on it or just to stay generally informed. We really appreciate it. As it pertains to the FTC, we believe in two simple truths on this matter. One, that this is a job for the FTC, and two, that the FTC should take immediate action. We believe as a consumer protection agency, the FTC is uniquely positioned to protect consumers from unfair or deceptive trade practices around their geolocation data, and that other entities that are related to the location data industry don't have either the power or the incentive to prevent these sort of trade practices. Market incentives alone will not protect consumers from nefarious location data practices because, as Luke mentioned, consumers are often left in the dark about what's going on with their information. And as such, they cannot make an informed choice or collectively use their dollar votes as a way of affecting change in regards to the location data industry. Industry actors who profit from the collection and dissemination of geolocation data also have no incentive to change their tactics without regulatory intervention. So that's where the FTC comes in. Over the past couple years, Congress has urged the FTC on several occasions to get involved and to bring enforcement actions against the location data industry. In January of 2019, Congress urged both the Federal Communications Commission and the Federal Trade Commission to broadly investigate the sale of Americans' location data by wireless carriers, location aggregators, and other third parties. And in response to this congressional prompting, the FCC investigated and fined wireless carriers, levying fines of over $200 million. But the FCC also noted that with regards to location data industry actors who are not wireless carriers, the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, was the sole authority. So after that congressional prompting in 2019, Congress issued a letter once again in 2020 asking the FTC to investigate widespread privacy violations by companies in the ad tech industry. But given the lack of action by the FTC, in response to that second prompting, Congress in 2021 decided to take matters into its own hands by requesting information as it relates to the real-time bidding advertising exchange process. And they wanted to request that information directly from companies involved in the matter, including companies like Google. But I say all that to say that there is congressional support for the FTC to act on this topic, and there have been other agencies that have gotten involved, but they need help from the Federal Trade Commission. So that help can come in the form of immediate enforcement action. And we are asking for enforcement action against 5 different categories of actors within the location data industry. Those actors include app developers that include location tracking code without fully understanding that code or disclosing the way that it works to their users. The developers of such code, software development kit developers who fail to inform apps of the code's location tracking capabilities. Mobile operating systems is the third party that we're asking for enforcement against. Actors in the real-time bidding advertising exchange process that retain consumer data, and then also location aggregators who receive or purchase location data without making sure that their practices are consistent with disclosures that are made to consumers. So, in addition to those enforcement actions, which include fines, warning letters, or notices, as it relates to those 5 different categories of parties, we think that the Federal Trade Commission can also bolster consumer protection by issuing guidance to parties that are involved in the location data industry, guidance that will give them affirmative steps that they can use to avoid deceiving consumers in the future, as well as initiating a rulemaking as it pertains to mobile operating systems and advertising exchanges. So with that, I will pass it back to our clinic director, Professor Laura Moy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luke and Quentin. And to wrap up our presentation, I will turn it over to Gadir Abbas, an attorney with CAIR.
Whenever there's revelation about surveillance against the Muslim community, at some point somebody will ask the question, are you surprised about the surveillance? And the answer is always no, because there is a pervasive sense of surveillance inside the Muslim community that has been there for a very long time, at least since I've been conscious about these kinds of things. And this is the low-hanging fruit of all the surveillance that disproportionately affects Muslims. This is the ruthless, relentless extraction of location data from people that have no idea that they're giving it over to defense contractors, to ultimately the military, for use not to sell us Kleenex or lollipops, but to target us for additional surveillance or maybe even military action. We hope that the FTC will engage on this issue substantially, comprehensively, in a way that puts these abusive, illegal practices of the location data industry behind us. Thank you.
Great, all right. Shall we wrap it up? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us.